very good afternoon to you, our cherished listeners. It's always very, very exciting to come your way every Wednesday with your favorite business development program on radio, Masterclass. Masterclass comes your way every Wednesday at 1:15 p.m. and runs all the way through to 2 p.m. here on your superstation, Joy 99.7. Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and brought to us by Goyle. Goyle, they say good energy. Goyle, Yenara, Yedia. We're always excited to come your way every Wednesday as we discuss the issues that affect our businesses, our entrepreneurs every day here on Masterclass. And so in the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about the effect of the dreaded COVID-19 on our businesses as entrepreneurs. Last week, we spent some time here in the studio with John Armour, sharing some thoughts on how to stay afloat as a business, in these terrible times. He did share some thoughts about being innovative, looking at different ways to approach your business in order to survive. I think we took some notes there on that show. Today we want to continue that conversation, but we're going to be spending time in the studio with two wonderful gentlemen. I call them friends of the show because they have been here they have been here on the show in time past. They also spent some time with us when we had that wonderful conversation on sexual harassment at the workplace and how it affects productivity. And we're joined by them again today, two wonderful brains, I call them, in the field of human resource, as we talk about the topic today, how to stay afloat as a business in these times of COVID, the human resource factor. I'm joined in the studio today by Mr. Samuel Kwame Boafo and Senyo Ajabing, who are both private HR practitioners, and in different fields of endeavor, they have done a lot and shared different thoughts on human resource. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the human resource factor. I mean, throughout the world, we hear things about the effect that COVID is having on businesses, the effect that COVID-19, generally business is slow. We talked about burn rate last week. Burn rate being how long can a business go and take care of its overheads and all of its payments it has to make without revenue coming in. We found out that for most businesses in Ghana, depending on the size of the business, the burn rate is nothing more than 1 month. And so you found out that when we had to stay home under lockdown together with all the restrictions for this period of about 6 weeks or so, the burn rate has hit rock bottom for most businesses. And so you hear things like great businesses, even abroad and all of that, laying people off. People are having to go home. People are having to innovate. One of the greatest things that has happened is that change has been forced upon all of us in the way we work. And so you find that a lot more people are having to work from home. A lot more people are having to work online. There's a lot more online meetings today. Now people work from home. We're going to be having that conversation today. How has COVID-19 affected entrepreneurs and their businesses and their workers and employees today? Looking at the human resource factor. When I say the human resource factor, we're looking at staffing. We're looking at human resource policies. We're looking at the way we used to do things. We're looking at things like reporting hours, attendance. We're looking at do people work longer hours now than they used to have to work. We're looking at all sorts of things, leave management. We're looking at sanctions. We're looking at essentially the contribution of the human resource to the business today and its metamorphosis, if you like, whether or not that has started in this period of COVID-19. So I know that we have a lot to share today. I know I'm going to be opening the phone lines at some point for my listeners to also get interactive, but maybe we'll start with Senyo. You share some thoughts with us for a couple of 6 minutes, and then Sam, you come in as well, and you also share some thoughts, and then we get interactive, and then we have a wonderful show, yes? All right, so Senyo, you take us away. What are some of the notable areas that have been affected? And try and bring the conversation home to Ghana and to our situation here in Ghana. Because obviously there's things going on out there that are supported by technology, which is not available today. I'll give you an example. We're talking about children having school online. Now, how's that affecting the school as a business and its human resource? We're talking about school fees. It was in the news about 3 weeks ago. Parents say we won't pay 100% school fees. Some say we'll give you 50% discount. Children are having to go to school online. How many children come from homes where they have more than one computer, if there's more than one child, and they can be online and have lessons? All of these have affected all of our lives. So how is the human resource factor positioned in all of this conversation? Senyo, take us away.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. So I've just been thinking this afternoon about, the saying that says that the human resources at the companies most important assets, right? And gone are the days when this saying used to be challenged by a lot of people, and it used to be paid only lip service. But now you realize that when COVID hit, the first area of a business it affected was the operations, as to how do we continue to operate. The next one was what do we do with the people we have? And that shows how important human resources is in the management of COVID. And without people and the right way of going about it, it becomes difficult for a business to even survive. And even complicating it is all the issues of the legalities of how to handle the employment contract of a lot of employees. So the first area that comes to mind is the issue of work attendance. So how do we come to work and how do we work or how do employees come to work and how do they work is one of the fundamental questions that every business has had to ask, during this COVID period. And for me, I think that is impacted because generally, all of a sudden, organizations have had to ask their workers to work from home, and especially during the lockdown. And then some organizations also have had to just shut down all operations. But how about those who were asked to work from home? What are the dynamics of their work? Were they required to work normal hours? Were they required to just take care of their specific job schedules and that's it? And these are questions that organizations have had to ask and deal with within the context of COVID. So it is great and important for organizations to be able to determine, so now if someone is working from home or any other remote place, like a disaster recovery center, how is the person's working hours calculated, for example? Is the person supposed to be paid the same amount for the number of hours they work? How about the allowances they used to take? The remuneration, is it going to be reduced? Or I've heard some organizations where employees have even asked for additional incentives for working from home and other resources that are needed for working remotely, like broadband, internet services, phones, and so on and so forth. So for me, that has been one of the main impacts, on businesses in terms of attendance of employees at work. Another one has been the issue of, so if we are supposed to maybe close down or stop operations or work remotely or do flexi work, how do we remunerate our workers? So the actual issue of pay has become a problem where financially organizations are impacted, and so they have not had the general financial muscle to be able to meet their costs. And under these circumstances, some organizations have found a way to reduce employee salaries. So remuneration has been impacted, even to the extent that some employees have been asked have been terminated. So generally, not only remuneration has been impacted, but also jobs have been impacted. So I'll leave it here, as an opening statement, and I think that maybe some can also shed light on some of them, so that when we go into them in detail, we can talk about the specifics of law and operations and HRM policy interventions that organizations can use.
Brilliant. If you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass on your superstation Joy 99.7. You just heard from Senor Ajabing, a private HR practitioner, and was sharing thoughts on how to stay afloat as a business in these times of COVID, the human resource factor. Senor, there's something you mentioned in your closing statement just before Sam comes in about looking at the position of policy to aid all of these changes. That is definitely something that is going to have to play catch up. So at some point in the conversation, if we have a bit of time, we will look at that, because it looks as if we're having to catch up in an ad hoc way, because we're all very unprepared for this. Maybe not all of us. Some people knew, like the conspiracists say, but most of us didn't know. And so we woke up one morning and suddenly we had to do all of these changes. Clearly, policy does not currently support a lot of the changes that are being made. Yes. And so that will have to also line up at some point.
On policy, let me just say this, that organizations that had crisis management policies in place or disaster recovery policies in place had the ability to be able to kind of take immediate actions. But the other side of it is post-COVID, as to how organizations will adjust. And that is why, in terms of policy, it is and should have been mandatory for every organization to draft new and apply new policies, COVID-related policies, to take care of the unique situation. And so, if organizations have not already drafted a COVID policy, it is important that they are, because that is what actually will drive the entire HRM intervention in terms of dealing with employees during the COVID pandemic.
And I dare say that not just policy, but things like budget, things like strategy, all of that will have to change, because look at these things. You go to get approval for your budget, let's say before end of year or before whenever, or at, let's say beginning of year. You start your your year. March, bam, you're hit with this thing. Suddenly everything goes haywire. Your investments that you decided to make in the year, perhaps were in a certain direction. Suddenly people are having to work from home. Let's say you are an institution of programmers, okay, or you are an institution that has people sitting and working all the time, a call center. So they're using desktop computers, for example. Suddenly they're having to work from home. Access to your system, security, all of that comes into the conversation. It's a big conversation, but we can't have all of it today. Sam, as you come in with your thoughts, and after you share your thoughts, we're going to be going into, so what should an employer do with each of these cases? We'll try and prefer solutions if you like, because you guys are professionals in your field and fields of endeavor, so that someone listening to us can say, listen, I have this situation, it's real, how do I go about it? But see if you can touch on things like recruitment, leave management, attendance, training, staff costs, stuff like that, because these are realities for every employer today. Talk to us, Sam.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I will take it up from where my brother Senor left off. In terms of the impact of COVID on organizations, particularly, I say that no organization can say that they were ready for this. Even though you saw the signs from China, it was very remote. We didn't think that it was going to catch up within the time that it did. Yes, there was a lag time for us to prepare, but let's say that, like you said in your intro, that we've been forced to move maybe 100 years ahead. Now, for the HR professionals, the challenge has been how to steer the organization through this period, because the organization is being forced to review its operations, forced to review its methodologies, its strategies, and approaches in delivering the service or the product that is into, as well as coming up with intervention to safeguard the health, safety of the staff and the clients who come into your premises. So during this period, most HR professionals have been working towards that field of helping both the organization and the staff stay course and be able to achieve the we also have to deal with the psyche and morale of your staff, that in the course of this and the fear, the panic, getting to know somebody close here is diagnosed with a condition. In the analysis that we did earlier on, somebody said that we started off with social distancing, we went on to physical distancing, and then because when we went into the lockdown, there was also the emotional distancing, because suddenly I'm not used to staying in the long period with my family in the same room, not going anywhere yet, expected to work, and the challenges that came with it. And then there is also the financial distancing. People went into hard times because the organization slows down. Remuneration, as you talk about, is constrained, and that, there are demands on you at home. So people are staying at home, not working, wanting to come to work, expecting to be paid, but organizations are also facing challenges on how they get their own operations going on. So in the midst of this, the HR side has been how to balance the skills, making sure that we can advise companies or our companies in making sure that they stay afloat, but as well as manage the expectations, psyche, and safety of the staff to make sure that between us, we can get the company back on stream. A lot have gone into, the conversation during this period, and it's been put before COVID, during COVID, we are not out yet. So during the lockdown, the interventions that were put in place were markedly different on how to support people to work from home, and suddenly works that could not even be work from home, so you have to find a way. I heard a joke, somebody saying that, well, in his company, even drivers say that they are working from home because suddenly they can't come to the office, but they are supposed to work. So it's a maze that we are trying to navigate. The challenge has been, how do we keep our companies afloat, alive? Because if the companies aren't there, we aren't there. And Senor made a point. I've also heard instances where even some employees volunteer to say we are willing to take a cut, just so that the company can stay and go through. So the impact has been both ways. The staff is suffering and the companies are suffering. And on the HR side, it's been how to try and get the balance between these two challenges that are going on. And I think so far, it's a novel situation, then just like the virus itself, we are all learning to adapt to what comes up every day in order to meet these two expectations.
Sam, let's talk about the specific issue of training. So I'll come to you shortly, because you find that we are having to innovate, and innovation is not necessarily technology; it's just a different way of doing things. How is an employer supposed to innovate where training is concerned, depending on the service that they provide? The thing is this, whether we like it or not, we are being pushed or we're being thrust into an era of, should I say, techie or IT or I don't know, whatever synonyms you want to call it. But we're being thrown into the computer age now. So questions like, I'm a farmer, I plant yams, I weed with a hoe, I make my mount with a hoe. Don't talk to me about computers.
Yeah.
We may not have the answers today, but at some point we're going to have to learn how to make those mounts with computers, whether the answer is here today or not. And that's where the innovation comes in. It started on the high end with a lot of corporates and all that. But let's explore some thoughts. Let's talk about training. Yeah. What's an employer supposed to do, or how is he supposed to innovate where training is concerned? And let's try and give examples across the spectrum so that we don't only stay in the corporate or in the SME space, but let's also talk about the ordinary Joe who's selling stuff on the streets. How is he supposed to innovate? We're training. Let's talk about training first. Then we spread the argument or conversation to the rest of the business.
Okay, yeah. The conversation about training is about one thing. What is the training meant to achieve? What is the specific objective for having that training? That will determine the mode that you can deliver the training. Currently, we are under some kind of restriction, so you cannot organize the formal classroom-based training. Okay, but dependent on the industry or the area of your operation, there are certain aspects of training that you can carry out. For example, if the nature of your business is providing driving services or driving school, the classroom-based school is clearly prohibited. You can't do that. But on-the-job training in terms of taking people out there on the road and teaching them how to drive, so far as you are keeping the social distancing regulations, you can easily do that. Now, for most organizations, question that I ask is that for those who are in manufacturing, those who are in production, hardcore production, it's a bit constrained in terms of bringing in machinery, certain people on the job training and all that. But there are aspects of your operations that you can easily, deliver the training with the use of technology. I mean, you talk about Zoom, there are other portals that people are using. So I can sit here and attend, and it's been amazing the number of training programs that people have had to attend online, during this period of COVID. I'm sure that people have had more webinars and Zoom meetings and Zoom everything now than they would have in a whole year, because webinars gives you a packed program over a shorter period, as opposed to staying the whole day in a classroom just to acquire a fraction of what you would have had anyway. So the innovation is about deciding what I have to do. Am I requiring my people to get new skills for me to survive, or am I doing training for the nicety of providing my staff with training? If the objective is to give them new skills, I believe strongly that there are ways that we can organize that training to give the people that skill that they need to help the company survive the current times. It may be challenging, but there are opportunities that we can get the training going.
Right. Okay. Now let's spread the conversation a bit more, Senor, to the rest of the business. So let's say my name is Yaw Apia. I'm a spare parts dealer in Abosokai. I want to push my product out, but markets and stuff like that, there's restriction on movement and all. So a few people come and patronize my product. I come from an era where people will come. The mechanic is the intermediary. He will lead the owner to come there, physically look at the part, examine it physically, and say, I like this one. This one is compatible. Take it to the car fitting shop and work on it. Now, because of all of this, that process may have to change. How else can I use innovation? And my mind goes to going shopping online. People buy stuff online and somehow it works. I mean, there's a few scenarios where you buy it and the thing comes in, it doesn't fit. But I suppose the manufacturers are also changing. So those scenarios are minimized. How can we bring that to Ghana today? I sit in Abosoka. I sell car tires. Can I work with an intermediary? And I don't want to answer it, but okay, so you answer it for me. How can I make it work? Looking at the staffing I have, innovate that staffing, give them more tools or whatever, but still get my business done without losing out or going under.
Yes, I think that when it comes to innovation, it must be driven by something, and that something is value. That means that can we create more value using less resources? And so the first thing that comes to mind from the example you gave is about using technology. So for example, if I have a phone and I can take pictures of the product in different angles and have enough discussions with the person on phone before it goes to the person, so that the person doesn't have to come. That is one of the ways you cut the cost of transport, you cut the cost of the person you are sending, who you have to give something, and so on and so forth. So for me, I think that in the workplace, if we can look at how we can basically do the same things that we do using resources available, simple resources available at reduced cost, then that drive alone, that motivation would help us to end up adjusting. But on training, have you realized that all of a sudden, and I've not heard, maybe, I don't know if some can attest to that, but I've not heard any organization giving crash courses or any form of courses, online courses to their employees, and all of a sudden the employees are supposed to just up and start using Zoom and other online platforms and other resources that they are supposed to work with. Now, training is very important, and about innovating training, basically an employer would have to look at how they can transfer knowledge at reduced cost and within the constraints of COVID, where there's less limitation. So these are we can talk about practical issues, but these are the broad things that would guide, innovation. And all organizations are different. So each organization will have to customize solutions for themselves and not necessarily blind copy.
Okay. Sam, I want to take this one for me very quickly. Then we will open the phone lines. I want us to get interactive pretty early today so that our listeners can be a part of it. You find that in all of this, in this situation, in this situation of COVID, it's a crisis for everyone. And so you've got staff who also in their private lives are individuals and they pursue different fields of endeavor. It's affected all of us one way or the other. And so, Sam, you were talking about the psyche of the employee. You find that people come to work in the same breath where we say the business isn't having, should I say, good income streams. And so overheads will have to be reviewed or looked at. you find in the same breath a request for some kind of support as a crisis benefit, if I can call it that. You can extend that conversation to support for resources like data. Suddenly, I'm supposed to be on every Zoom call. Jack, you give me 10 CD credit a month as a staff. Suddenly, I'm supposed to bundle out of that 10 CD and be on 15 calls or 15 meetings or 25 meetings. Who tells you that my phone is even a smartphone that can have video calls? Maybe my camera is not working. Support for staff vis-a-vis the reality of the business not having enough inflows, even to keep the staff traditionally, not to talk of keeping them now electronically. Let's share some thoughts on that conversation very briefly, and then we go to the phone line.
Okay, yeah. The conversation has been, fantastic point as to how do you assess your employees to work remotely, because now work is not defined as the place that you sit and work. The work is defined as what you do. Okay, so if you're requiring me to work remotely, the same as you are required to provide the resources available to me to do, make an effort to make it possible for me to do my work irrespective of where I am. That is, if you require me to stay away. So that challenge is there in terms of the overhead cost on the organization. But something also has to give. I mean, if I was to attend a formal classroom training, the cost of that training invariably is more expensive than if it is delivered online for me. So yes, in as much as the resources are coming on one side, the organization cuts down on overheads also on other aspects. And in most of the conversations that you hear, the first thing that companies did in terms of responding to the COVID was to hold certain operations or cut things that were not so urgent at a point as a way of minimizing that overhead. I think that the investment in ensuring that people can work remotely is something that shouldn't be looked at within the context of what we are currently going through, because this new normal as defined isn't going to go away in the short term. I mean, this morning I was listening to a conversation that says that it takes from now minimally, companies are looking at 2022 as the point where things begin to seem normal. So whatever investment that is being made today is something that is going to linger on for a while, and so it shouldn't be seen in terms of an immediate cost, but rather an investment that will sustain the viability of the business. Now, the other bit that I want to talk about or add on to is the fact that companies responded and decided which of our operations can I do without, which business side can I outsource, for example, as a way of minimizing the overhead cost. I heard a story of a bank in Nigeria, I don't know how credible it is, making a case that they have made a decision to let go 25% of their workforce because in their assessment, they come to the term that that job can easily be done by people who don't necessarily even have to come to the work setting. And so it provides an opportunity to review your overhead costs in terms of staff, as well as redesign the work to make sure that people can do their job. Now, the resources comes with its own challenges. If you are delivering products, if you're delivering training, if you're working from outside, there are cybersecurity implications. It requires a specific investment to ensure that where people work are free from these cyber security issues and can provide you with the kind of security that you need to get your job going.
Okay. Senor, just share some thoughts briefly and then we go to the phone line.
Yes, so basically, support for workers is also about cost analysis. And this brings us to an important area of workforce management. And we find it in the Labor Law, Section 98G, the essential services within the establishment. So the first thing an organization can do about supporting staff and still working within the constraint of finances is to look at the minimum maintenance services within the organization for which, they would apply those workers, those essential workers first, and then start looking at who else can support at minimum cost to get production going. And for me, I think that in terms of the whole cost, discussion about workplace running the business, I think that COVID has provided a lot of opportunity for organizations that really want to do something about it and sustain their business to actually cut down costs, so much so that they will realize that past COVID was worse than post-COVID is going to be.
Wow, some wonderful thoughts. If you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass on your Superstation. We'll be going to the phone line shortly, but before that, we have some great news for you. So do you have any motor vehicle of any kind? Because if you do, Goil's new Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 lubes are the best engine oils for your vehicle. They are specially engineered engine oils which efficiently work on all your modern petrol and diesel engines. They clean, they protect, they reduce fuel consumption, and they prolong oil change intervals, as well as enhance your engine performance, right from when you start up to when you switch off. So go to any Goil filling station today and grab the new Goil Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 engine oils for superior vehicle performance. Goil, we say good energy. Goil, Yenara, Yedia. We go straight to the phone lines. Numbers to call 0302-216-541. That's 0302-216-541. Pick up that phone, give us a call. As an employer, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, how are you handling your human resource in this COVID period? What questions are on your mind? What do you think you want to do to help your business? What have you already done? What have you heard that others have done? Pick up that phone, give us a call. Let's share some thoughts and make Ghana better for it. 0302-216-541. Or you can send us a comment on 0244-340-437. If you are driving, please do not text while you drive. We want you to arrive alive. So do park off and send us a comment on 0244-340-437. Otherwise, give us a call on 0302-216-541. So I wanted to ask a question. Sam, let's talk about working hours. No, Senor, let's start with you. Working hours. Sam, you talked about working hours and the fact that now the work is what you do, is not where you are. So back in the day, and I don't know, Senor, please correct me, since you quoted from the labor law, there's this conversation that says that a person cannot have a number of jobs full time because of the issue of tax and all of that. Perhaps you'll demystify that first. Now I'm working from home. My name is Yaw. I'm working from home. I can be in 4 meetings at the same time and just listen for when they say, yes, yeah, what do you think? Yeah, are you there? Yes, yes. Then I'll come and speak. Meanwhile, I'm on another call. So I can be doing 5 jobs now. This question is for the tax system, but from the HR perspective, I mean, I know you can share some thoughts. How long before the tax system catches up? I know IRS is doing it in the US, but working hours, tax, people having multiple jobs, how is that conversation going to go now?
That's a very interesting one. You know, our permanent work or permanent contracting of work, okay, comes under what we call contract of service. Okay, so in contract of service, the employer pays for your time. Okay, so pays for the time. So once the employer is paying for the time, the employer owns you from 8 to 5.
You can't sell that time again.
You can't. So it is for the employer. That is full-time employment. And that is why it is difficult to say that a person is working full-time for multiple employers, because the structuring of the contract relationship, the employment contract relationship, is such that you can work and are supposed to devote your time to that employer specifically, unless, of course, you get leave of that employer to do a few other things. But how will hours of work within COVID? The issue is that it is going to be difficult to now monitor people regarding the number of things they do, because assuming somebody is working remotely, their deliverables does not become time. It becomes task specific. So if it is task specific and he's able to meet all his deadlines by 11 a.m. in the morning, because he started working, say, around 4 a.m. When he woke up, then the rest of the time is his own to use and manage, and may be able to use it for other endeavors that the employer may not be able to know. If we have a good tax system, definitely, if you do other jobs and you invoice, that action alone can trigger, a tax activity such that then you can be taxed, at least maybe withholding tax. But as to how the income tax processes can catch up with multitasking in terms of multi-working or working for multiple employers, I think that we'll leave that to the tax experts to find solutions to. But I just think that it's a loophole.
Yeah.
And once we are HR people and we want to maximize resources, we say that it is an opportunity for employees to exploit, okay, or take advantage of, such that they can make, more use of time and earn more money. It's up to the system to put processes in place to have other issues like tax and the rest of them taken care of.
And from the employer's point of view, I mean, the employer can also say that, well, conscious of the fact that these practices may be happening, I can decide to go into an arrangement with you, in which case I am moving from contract of service to contract for service. Yes. In which case, I'm going to pay you based on the specific deliverables. So get me 40 bottles of this product a day. Irrespective of what time it takes for you to deliver, that tax for the day is done. What you do else isn't my problem. Than to say, I am owning you from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and still expect that even if your task is done, you still remain, under my control, so to speak. So the benefit to the employer will be, well, in terms of that, then I'm negotiating on the specific deliverable. So 40 bottles a day, I pay you 20 cedis. I pay you 20 cedis for the 40. As opposed to pay you 30 cedis for the whole day, when really I will not get any mileage between beyond the 40 bottles. So
so what it means is that per COVID, the COVID pandemic and its impact, we may be moving from full-time employment to contract or part-time employment.
And for me, I see that long-term. I say long-term because it'll take us some time to get there. I see that this is where the conversation is going to go. And at some point, hiring people will be based on a certain skill set and ability to deliver a certain required task. Now, let's talk about versatility in recruitment. Because if I'm doing an assignment in the comfort of my space, which I have set up, when I'm negotiating, I'm going to build that space to you. I'm going to build everything to you, including the speed. When you hire me or interview me, you hire me based on my specific skill and ability to deliver something. Let's say a finance person. Now you give me spreadsheets to work on. It's like an open book test for me. I can have somebody in my basement who is a finance person from some part of the world who is very good. And I am fronting as a finance person. My credentials and everything show. But you give the job to me, it gets done. It doesn't matter whether I'm the one who did it or not. How is that going to play in a space of recruitment? You see where this conversation is going. Numbers to call 0302216541. Pick up that phone, give us a call. I can slip through one or two calls before the end of the show. 0302216541. Recruitment is going to change. How is it going to change? Based on the example I've just given.
You are very right. But unfortunately, right, and maybe fortunately for the employer, and unfortunately for a person like you who wants to front, contemporary human resources doesn't work like that. There is supposed to be a system that justifies your ability, your competencies, your capacity to do the job. And that is what talent acquisition is about. That would innovate and use processes, and these are very available, that we will use to test your competency first before we start sending you those spreadsheets.
So let's say I'm good at what I do. I can actually do the spreadsheets. I'm just a lazy bug. So when it comes to speed, that's where you're going to have the problem. At the interview, I will ace it. But when I go home, I'm working for 5 different corporates. So I will hire 5 different people from 5 different countries who are less privileged than myself and be their agent and pay them one quarter.
No, but what you are discussing right now was already happening pre-COVID.
So it's going to be more pronounced now.
Yes, but the point is that a time will come that a very good system can expose you. Yes.
Some of these things.
Because when, for example, we are in crisis, like COVID, and you are put on a team, okay, then you cannot now be doing your remote sourcing easily because you are going to be engaged fully, and your capacity is going to be challenged, and the system will expose you. So I don't think it's something that professionals and employees should be looking at doing. They should actually work hard and do their best and earn their salary instead of cutting corners, because a very good contemporary human resource system and structure will expose you.
Let's talk about, and while you talk about that, let's try and round up the conversation. What are the labor concerns that are going on now regarding the fact that businesses are unable to keep the certain staffing levels now? Overheads are they're teetering around the bend. What's the conversation that's going on now, and what are some of the reliefs available both for an entrepreneur or a business owner and the staff?
I think the first one is...
I think there's some law that says you cannot make me worse off. So for those who are taking haircuts on salary and all that, it's based on certain logical reasoning. But what's the position of the law, very briefly, just in about 30 seconds? I'll start with you.
Okay. In the conversations that have gone on, I think we made mention of it earlier on.
Yeah.
For you talk about people taking haircuts, and the law has made it that if you want to lay somebody off, there are procedures to go. Now, the COVID has raised issues as to whether the principles of force majeure or the other stuff you call leave of absence with pay can be applied within this context. And in the conversations that have gone on, I think that you'll find a buy-in from both sides that if people have to be laid off under these circumstances because principles of frustration, that the nature of the impact of this COVID has frustrated my business, and so I can't keep you.
Is that not a topic for discussion or argument or debate?
Well, these are matters of law, and we talked about earlier that COVID now is requiring a review of certain policies. You understand?
I definitely have to bring you gentlemen back. So let's take your reaction very quickly. I'm out of time. 20 seconds, and then we round up.
Yeah, so I think that the two issues I'm looking at are pay and the issue of termination. But straightforward, we need to know that the impact of COVID-19 is not a redundancy issue. So that is out. So if terminations are to happen, the contract of employment is still at play. So if salaries will be reduced, it has to be done by renegotiation. And if terminations will be done, it has to still be done in accordance with the terms of the contract of employment.
Thank you so much. This has been Masterclass on the Superstation, discussing the human resource factor and businesses as they can stay afloat in this COVID period. We come your way same time next week with this conversation. Thank you for listening. Up next